I am an orientation and mobility specialist.
I'm a lawyer.
I'm a firefighter.
I'm an advocate.
I'm a sister.
I am a mother.
I'm a friend.
I am me.
I have bipolar disorder.
Depression.
On borderline personality.
I'm not embarrassed.
1 out of 5 people lives with a mental health condition.
We're all people, and if we talk about it, there's hope.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Smith, Executive Director of Preventionfocus. I'm also a board member of the Anti-Stigma Coalition. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to welcome you to the latest in our series of Facebook Live events. This time we're focusing on the state of stigma, mental health of veterans and their families. Military service often brings with it large amounts of stress and trauma, the effects of which can challenge veterans for years long after they have left active duty. Those challenges not only impact the men and women who have served, but their families and friends as well. Stigma often acts as an additional impediment to veterans and their families as they wrestle with needing help, wanting help, and seeking the help that they need. So what's being done to overcome stigma and get more help for our veterans and their families in Western New York? What else is needed? We are fortunate to have a panel of 3 local experts willing to lend their perspective as we attempt to answer these questions. Before I introduce our panelists, there are a couple of housekeeping rules. Our program is for 1 hour. During this time, if you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box and we will respond accordingly. Your questions often lead to some great dialogue, so please don't be shy. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists. Dan Arnold retired from the Air Force in 2007 after 23 years of active service. He moved back to Buffalo in 2017 and started working at the Veterans One-Stop Center of Western New York in 2018. The Veterans One-Stop Center provides supportive services to veterans and their families in a convenient single location. They empower veterans to achieve economic success, housing stability, and emotional health and well-being by offering a wide holistic range of social and health services needed to complete the transition from military to civilian life. Dan is currently managing the PFC Joseph P. Dwyer Peer Support Program in Erie and Niagara counties. The program brings veterans and their families together through veteran-to-veteran collaborative services, social activities, and community service. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Dan Mitchell is an Army combat veteran and served as a medic from 1989 to 1993. For most of his professional career, he's worked in the health and fitness industry, owning several gyms and fitness studios. He's a nationally certified personal trainer through the American College of Sports Medicine and a level 3 certified Tai Chi instructor. Dan is also currently employed by the Veterans One-Stop Center of Western New York and is the program manager of the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program. He is very grateful for this opportunity to serve our veterans and says the Staff Sergeant Fox program is the job of a lifetime for him. Dan volunteers at the Buffalo Veterans Treatment Court, where he serves as the mentor coordinator. Welcome to you too, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad to have you, Dan. Mike Shurmatz currently works as a readjustment counselor at the Buffalo Vet Center, where he specializes in integrative therapy for trauma and moral injury. He is currently in consultation developing a moral injury group protocol for Western New York veterans and addresses moral injury and individual therapy through an ACT perspective. Michael has facilitated multiple trainings on moral injury in the Western New York community through the NASW New York State Chapter, the Veterans Mental Health Training Initiative, and VA. Prior to coming to the Vet Center, Mike worked as a substance abuse residential rehabilitation treatment program social worker at the Buffalo VA and outpatient behavioral health senior counselor at Best Self Behavioral Health. Michael graduated from the UB School of Social Work, Master of Social Work in May of 2019. Prior to going back to graduate school, Mike was the manager for the PFC Joseph P. Dwyer Peer Support Program at the Veterans One-Stop Center of Western New York from 2015 to 2017. Mike served in the U.S. Army as a commissioned logistics officer from 2007 to 2011, serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom from 2009 to 2010. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. And welcome again to all of our panelists, and thank you all for joining us today. This is a very, very important topic, and we appreciate you lending your voice to it. Let's get started. All 3 of you have been involved with the Veterans One Stop, and Dan, would each of you explain your piece of what goes on there? Dan Arnold, why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I run the peer support program, the Joseph P. Dwyer program, which is a peer support program for veterans to integrate them back into the community after their time of service. It's important that we deal with veterans dealing with PTSD, TBIs, or any type of issues that they're having. And our goal is to, like I said, integrate them back into the community by doing social activities, one-on-one, I don't want to say counselings, but one-on-one peer support talks, where we'll sit down with each other and talk and try to make them feel comfortable with us and with other veterans. A lot of veterans always do feel comfortable talking to other veterans. But we want to do that, but we also want to, like I said, get them back into the community, which is an important aspect of coming back after their service. A good thing for me was when I first started with the Veterans One Stop, I started off as a caregiver coach. So I got to work with the families and the supporters of of veterans who were caring for the disabled veterans. And that gave me a good outlook and a real appreciation to make sure that we include caregivers and families into our peer support program.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Dan Mitchell, what does your program offer there at the One Stop?
Yeah, Matt, thanks. So I'm pretty brand new. We got the grant on the 19th of September. We were awarded the grant. It's a VA funded grant. I was hired on the 20th of September and then immediately went into hiring a staff. We've got 9 people on the staff, and then with myself, that's 10. We're spread out through 12 counties. So we cover 12 counties. Prior, the One Stop covered 8 counties, and with the Staff Sergeant Fox grant, we were able to cover the 4 counties bordering the Finger Lakes. So we're spread out over a pretty wide area. The goal of the grant, the function of the grant, is to go out into the community, find veterans where they are, find our veterans where they live, where they are, if they are in isolation, if they're not connected with services. Our job is to find those individuals, establish eligibility, bring them into the program, bring them into the services that are available. Many of the things that Dan was just talking about, we hired case managers and peer support specialists to do this work and to find our veterans and bring them in. So in a nutshell, that's what the grant program is for. That's what it's built for. That's what it's about. Community integration.
Well, thank you for all that very important stuff. Appreciate knowing it. Mike Shurmatz, you also worked with Veterans One Stop for a while there. Have things changed since you were there? How was your experience working there?
I used to be Dan Arnold. So I ran the peer program from 15 to 17. It was kind of in a rough way when I stepped in, and we really just did a lot of work to collaborate with the community and kind of get back to the roots of like kind of looking at things integratively, not what can we do, but what can we all do collectively to support the veterans, because it's not a one slice of the pie is where success comes from. It's the whole thing put together. And I'm thrilled to have transitioned into a clinical role and to have the perspective of a peer previously. So I understand the importance of that as an additional connection for our veterans that really impacts their lives. They're in therapy for an hour, maybe once a week, more than likely once every couple of weeks, right? And what are they doing with all the rest of that time? What's happening in their lives, what's coming out of the therapy room and going into their lives. And that's where peers are just so instrumental in getting veterans active and acclimated and readjusted and social again and connected. And that's so much of what we do in therapy is, reestablishing your identity and the importance of that, but then it actually has to happen. And sometimes it's really difficult for a veteran to do it without another veteran kind of bringing them along. So it's just, I love doing stuff like this because it speaks to the nature of our veteran community and the services in our community and how collaborative we are. Because I don't think it's like this everywhere. And it's awesome to watch it continue to progress, develop, and become more collaborative as we move forward.
Great. So you're at the vet center now.
Yep.
So what exactly does the vet center do, and what is your role at the vet center?
I'm a readjustment counselor, and regardless of whether we're social workers, psychologists, that's kind of what comprises the clinical staff. We're all just readjustment counselors, and we provide individual and group therapy for currently serving service members, recently transitioning veterans that have just come out of the service, combat veterans, any veteran that discloses any kind of military sexual trauma or having experienced any kind of military sexual trauma. And then we also provide bereavement counseling to family members of a veteran that was being seen at the center. We can also provide couples and marriage counseling. And we are on kind of a case-by-case basis able to work individually with the spouses or significant others of a veteran if the issues pertain to like what the veteran is going through in terms of like difficulties related to their service. So we're able to provide all of those types of services to veterans, not only in the Western New York community, but because of telehealth, if we have the capability, also outside of the area as well, if necessary.
Thanks, Mike. That's a lot. One thing I noticed in your bio, the term moral injury, and I don't know if everybody that's on this time together understands what that is. I'd love you to share everybody what that's really about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll do my best to share opportunities for specific trainings on moral injury because I'm doing them fairly regularly, where we can get, you can dive more into this, but to kind of give it a Reader's Digest look.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, when we think of trauma in the sense of like physical trauma or post-traumatic stress, we've been in a high stakes situation where, like it can be a matter of life and death, and there's the actualized like fear of, oh my God, I could be hurt, or I'm watching people be hurt, or, I'm witnessing or I'm learning about like somebody actually being physically harmed. I know that's a broad definition of PTSD, but when it comes to a moral injury, it's existential more than physical. So we're looking at kind of values and identity really being called into question. And by our own actions, the actions of other people, in terms of perpetration, inactions or, witnessing of things that go against our moral code, but we accept due to the fact that we are in the military and as part of that culture at that time, accepting those types of behaviors, even though they violate our values and our morals, is what's necessary for us to, be successful in that role. But then you transition out of the military, and oftentimes you're left with that kind of dichotomy or that fracturing of, this is how I behaved versus what I believe to be true and just and right, moral, and I can't make sense of that. And so now I'm having I suffer a soul wound or an identity crisis, and I start to really struggle with who I am. And it doesn't have to come from physical trauma or things related to post-traumatic stress disorder. This can come from acts of betrayal, toxic leadership. Think about service members that are discharged because of an injury, and essentially maybe have their unit kind of cast them out for the later part of their time in service. And what can that do to the way you view yourself and the way you view the organization you're a part of? So it goes beyond PTSD, and really it's not diagnosable at this time. But that doesn't mean people aren't presenting to treatment suffering from that. And the big thing with moral injury, and the way I want to relate this back to the peer support program and what they're doing, what the guys are doing at the One Stop, is that so much of the healing process of this comes from being connected with other people and finding those people again that you can unburden yourself of these things, talk to them about it, disclose some of these struggles that you're having, and still be accepted by people. as we go through the healing process, not the punitive process, which oftentimes in the military, things are very punitive. They're not very healing. And hopefully through kind of doing this work clinically and then getting people involved in peer support activities, that healing can take place and they believe that they can heal and reconnect again.
Thank you for that.
And on that, Mike, when you talked about getting with other veterans, the one great thing about our program is we're not clinical. We're just sitting around, two guys, two ladies, a guy, a lady, whatever, talking. And people feel really comfortable with that. And it really helps them open up. And I've seen it firsthand where people are opening up and talking about their feelings. And it's just us talking with each other. It's a great thing to see.
Really, really great. Thanks for that, Dan. We just have our first question come up on the chat. And anyone that's watching this right now can please just use the chat feature to ask any questions you might have. And our first one here is, it says, I'm a mental health therapist and would love to hear more about supporting veterans. What is the best way to collaborate with the VA throughout the process? Would like to take that.
One thing I'd like to say with this question is, first of all, we're not the VA. We're a nonprofit, Veterans One Stop, but we work closely with the VA, of course. But for other people out there who are counselors or health therapists to get involved with us, all they have to do is reach out. I have people reaching out to me all the time, counselors from Best Self, and all the other counseling places in Buffalo and Niagara and all the counties actually. And they refer veterans to us. And then, then I'll reach out to that veteran and contact that veteran, or even the social worker or the counselor, and I'll set up not counseling, but I'll set up meetings with them where I can come talk to their veterans. Matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going out to Freedom Village to talk to a group of veterans who are in their program. So anyone can reach out to us if they know a veteran or if they work with veterans and they feel the peer support program will help them, and we will definitely get involved and help them out.
Thanks, Dan. Just in general, what kind of issues are veterans presenting with at your various locations? Dan Mitchell, can we start with you? What are you seeing?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm the mentor coordinator also at the Veterans Treatment Court, at the Buffalo Veterans Treatment Court. So we get a lot of folks coming through that are dealing with homeless issues, financial insecurity, legal issues in that context. Here with this program, with the Staff Sergeant Fox program, we're looking to identify all those potential barriers along the way that could lead to, so it's a suicide prevention program. So what we're looking to do is identify potential barriers along the way that could lead to suicidality. So we see legal, we see benefits questions, benefits problems, we see homelessness, all these different factors that could lead to that potential suicidality.
Thank you. Mike, what about you? Anything additional?
Reintegration, I guess in general, for a lot of the men and women is just really difficult, kind of finding that purpose again that they had when they were serving, and reconnecting with that. We have such a population that runs generationally, like kind of all the way Vietnam all the way up till now. So people are dealing, they're at different periods of their lives in terms of, like the Vietnam veterans are kind of in that legacy period now, versus the post 9/11 veterans that are, really in the thick of, I have so much of my life left to live. And what am I going to do with this? One of the things that I'm really noticing, I guess maybe is a difference between when the Vietnam vets came back and there was a lot of advocacy work done based on how they came home and how they were received after they served, versus now I see so much of the post 9/11 veterans like wanting to be like involved in that healing process. They want to be out doing things, and being active in things and being reconnected with other veterans. So we don't always receive them like that, but a lot of times after some time in therapy, that's what they seek. So it's really awesome to know that all this stuff is out there and to be able to connect them with all these resources. So that, clinically speaking, when we're trying to reestablish purpose, we can then, actually have something to provide that might give them that purpose again.
Got it. One of the themes we're hearing over and over again is this theme of readjustment, this theme of reintegration. Why is that so difficult? What stands in the way of that? What makes that so hard? Dan Arnold, want to go first?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of it is the differences between the military culture and the military life compared to the civilian. Also, when you come back, like for example, for me, when I came back to the Buffalo area, I was active duty my whole time. None of my friends were here. So I had no military friends to lean on, thank God for social media. But in the local area, I just had my friends from my high school who didn't understand what I was going through and some of the issues that I was having. And it makes it very difficult to be able to reintegrate back into the community when there's no one for me to talk to. And it makes it really difficult. And, thank God I got into the position that I'm in now, because I always tell everybody it basically saved my life, because now I'm back into a military community. And I feel whole again, and it really helped. And that's why it's so important.
Thank you. Dan Mitchell, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I do. As Michael had mentioned, the identity factor, that core identity factor. So when we're in the service, we're being given certain guidelines, certain ways to live that are necessary for that identity. And then when we finish our enlistment, we get out, we shift to an entirely different, unknown identification that is not the same as it was before. So everybody, when we're in, we're thinking about when we get out, all the things are going to be the way that they were before we went in. We're gonna have these things that before we went in, everything was rosy, everything was perfect, and when we get out, everything's going to be reestablished. When in fact that wasn't the case. And then we get out and go back to what we thought was going to be there, and it's an entirely it's very disorienting, I think is the best word. It's really disorienting, really confusing.
Okay, thank you. Mike, anything to add on that?
Same general themes that Dan and Dan brought up, and just the going from such structure to such independence is extremely challenging, and one thing to recognize too is that this is oftentimes happening with veterans that are in their mid-20s, and it's like there's so much ahead of me that it's daunting and overwhelming. And I know that, from recently transitioning service members, the big push when they're getting out is, okay, like establish employment, but not figuring out what do I want to actually do? It's get a job and everything will be okay, right? And then like the Department of Defense is like, we did our job. They have a job after serving and they're okay, and they're linked with the VA. There's so much more to it than that. It's not just working. It's really spending some time to figure out, like, what do I want to do after this? Because nothing I do after this is going to be quite like it was to serve in the military. And I think that gets glossed over, that this transition is going to be difficult for you because of the nature of what you did and the environment and the culture in which you're going back to, which is so different. And we want to set you up to be prepared to deal with that, not in a way that causes you to withdraw because you feel like there's something wrong with you or you don't fit in, because it's not the case. It's very natural to go through this process of reintegrating, and oftentimes takes a while and can be difficult, but there are resources to help you and you should utilize them, if and when you need them. I think we act like this whole reintegration process is just supposed to be smooth and easy, and it's anything but that.
Got it. We talked about a little bit at the beginning, and I want to circle back to it. The friends and the family members of the veterans, what are they presenting with most often? What are the services that are there for them, to help them for themselves, but also to support the veterans that they care about?
I can take that, especially being a caregiver coach. Before I took over the peer support, a lot of them was guiding them through the medical system for them to get their help. That was one of the biggest concerns that a lot of caregivers were having, was dealing with the VA and working with other outside agencies to get their veteran the assistance that they need on the medical side. That was a big burden on them, because caregivers being recognized in the VA system is fairly new. They weren't in there in the process of the healing for the veterans, until recently, really, that I've seen. I mean, they were always there in the back door, but now the VA is finally starting to recognize them. They even have a VA caregiver program to help the caregivers guide those services for their veterans, which is a great program. And it also helps them, financially, if they qualify, because they're spending their time now not being able to work and support their family on their side, that the VA is starting to give them assistance that way also. So that was the big thing that I've noticed on the caregiver side, was getting the resources for the medical aspect for their veteran. But then as I've been growing in my peer support, I've been meeting a lot of family members, children of the deployed veteran or military people out there. They go through a lot when their parents are deployed and they're gone, and their father or their mother are gone for a long period of time. They start developing some issues. So that was a concern, and we actually we have a great program that's been always there, military OPCOM for the military child. And that's a great program that helps get those families together and those children together so they can talk with other children also, sort of like a child peer support for military children, which is great. But as these families are getting together, whether they're coming out to our family program or the OPCAM family program, they're talking with each other and they're learning more about the resources or lack of resources, or what kind of benefits that their veteran is qualified for. And they're starting to ask more and more questions about how can we ensure our veteran is getting their benefits and the ability to obtain those resources. So we've been guiding them in that way too, which is really important. So sometimes the veteran just doesn't think to ask those questions.
Got it. I mean, so some of this is informational, how to navigate the system,
exactly.
Kind of that kind of information. How much of the help is actually like skill based, though? As far as what's being done to help people to maybe help themselves, but also be supportive in this situation.
For the veterans or for the family members?
For the family members. For the family members or people who care about them. Is it mostly just
the skill will be adapting skills, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
They're learning those adapting skills, especially through the OPCOM program, because that's a mental health program where they have mental health counselors there who will be talking to them and helping them deal with some coping mechanisms and stuff like that to deal with their issues that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Great. Wonderful. I know that we've mentioned about the importance of peers. And I don't know if there's anything else anyone would like to add at this point, but why is it so significant that the peers are involved, and how much is being done to support the peers and what they're doing to help others?
From the clinical side, just recognizing that we have limitations in what we're capable of doing. Like my reach to the veteran really begins and ends at the door to the clinic. Like there are times when we're out in the community for outreach events or supporting, like Dan said, like with OPCOM, there might be mental health counselors or social workers there. Like we've gone out to support like equine therapy programs in the event that there's somebody gets, triggered or something comes up for somebody and they just need some help. But ultimately, like my influence on the veteran's life happens in the therapy room, and that's not life. That's not what their life looks like. that's just one small part of what their life looks like. But the peers are really instrumental in being involved in their lives, in the lives of the veterans, the day-to-day stuff, the things that may be small but are super significant. And that can go in either direction, meaning they're either not doing those things that are small and super significant, and that's really impacting their quality of life, or they've found a way to do those things with the inclusion of other people, and they're making meaning in their lives because they have these connections that are supportive of them. And like that, you could do the best therapy in the world, and if somebody just goes home and sits in the house all day, the rest of the day, like, what the hell's the point? That's not the point. The point is, like, we want you to be out living your life the way you want to be living it. I can help you figure out what that looks like, but then it needs to be lived by you, and peers are the ones that can really be that hand up to help get the veteran moving in that direction, knowing that it's okay.
And that's great, Mike, because you're exactly right. I have probably about over 1,000 members that come to our events over the last couple of years. And the growth I've seen because of the peers, not just me or the people that work with me, but it's the peers that are coming to events and the other veterans who are befriending each other. And that's how I know my program is successful. I know all my veterans. I know all the veterans that come to my events, and I talk to them as a peer. But my program is successful when I see two veterans who didn't know each other before make a friendship, and then I see them doing things outside of our programs. Like Mike said, they're becoming friends with other veterans, and those peers are connecting, and they're doing other things, living their lives, getting them out of their house. And that's how it's a successful program.
Thanks for all that. This is really a compelling conversation. If anyone's just joining us, I'm Matt Smith from the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, and I'm joined by Dan Arnold of the PFC Joseph P. Dwyer Peer Support Program, Dan Mitchell of the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Program, and Mike Shurmatz of the Buffalo Vet Center. We've been discussing stress and trauma among veterans and their families, and we will be moving into supports and the role of overcoming stigma in those efforts momentarily. Everyone joining us, please do take a minute and check out our website, letstalkstigma.org, and maybe join the nearly 4,000 others who have taken the pledge to end stigma. Also, if you are connected with a business, organization, or faith community, you can become an organizational member of the Anti-Stigma Coalition. You can find information for this on our website under the Members tab. Now, back to our panelists. We've got a couple of questions that have come in actually on the chat, and I'd like to address some of them. One was, we talked a little bit about peers just now, but what can non-veterans do to help out? People that aren't part of that military community, what can people that fit that description do better to lend an ear or a hand? Dan Mitchell, can I start with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think first and foremost, the thing that I always talk to people about is taking care of themselves. If I'm taking care of myself, it's more likely that I'm going to be able to connect and communicate with another individual from another subculture or another population, which is exactly what we're talking about. The veterans community is its own community. And sometimes I think the challenge that people who are not veterans find themselves in is they're trying to understand perhaps a little bit more than is necessary in order to get to the veteran. What we're looking for when we talk about a community supporter or somebody who's going to support the veteran community is just somebody who's taking care of themselves, somebody who's interested in being a part of what we do, somebody who's able to reach out, connect, communicate, provide resources potentially. There's a lot of different organizations that have different types of community-based support systems for veterans who are non-veterans. But the primary thing is to be taking care of themselves.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Anything else to add, guys, on that?
Yeah, I mean, just in regards to stigma, I mean, like that. This is the thing with stigma in regards to the veteran population, right? Like we identify ourselves as veterans, which kind of in and of itself stigmatizes us as being different from other people, right? And I get the importance of being identified as a veteran, and I'm happy to be identified as a veteran, but that's a part of who I am as a human being, right? It's a big part, but it's not the only part. And at the end of the day, what I hope we can come back to is that we're all people. We're all human beings, right? You may be a firefighter. I may be a veteran. You might be a police officer, a lawyer, a doctor, a veterinarian. You might work at a grocery store, but we're all people. And people all struggle at times in their lives, regardless of what their profession is. And that may look different for people, but we all go through hardships and hard times. And if we can just look to each other with compassion and empathy that, like, yeah, sometimes we are just going through some stuff and we need some help. And it doesn't have to be looked at as being different because of what we've done. It may well be, but if we can take a step back and just offer some common humanity and meet people where they're at, and with an open hand or open arms or an open mind, and say, I just want to be supportive of you, whatever that looks like for you, whatever you need from me. And I mean, I just think that would go such a long way in decreasing stigma anywhere it exists, you know, not just within, you know, the veteran population. We're all people first and foremost.
Well, thanks for going there, and thanks for bringing in the stigma. Obviously, we're the Anti-Stigma Coalition, and it's the main topic. We're kind of ramping up and getting into that now, and I really appreciate you helping with that transition, Mike. But what does it look like? What does stigma around mental illness look like in the military community and in the veteran community? Is there a difference between the two? Are there different ways this is manifesting itself? And does it get in the way of veterans getting the help that they need and supports? Dan Arnold, how about you first?
I think it definitely gets in the way. I mean, I'm hoping it's really changing in the military. I've been out since 2007. But when I was in, we didn't go to mental health. You know, there was people, you know, you have specific jobs, you have a security clearance, you know, different requirements. And if you go to mental health, you're afraid you're going to lose that. So it was always a thing where people did not want to go. People would hold it down and keep it inside, which obviously we all know causes more problems in the long run. I'm hoping that nowadays in the military that people are getting over that and they're starting to see that going to mental health is not a bad thing. You know, it's probably the best thing you can do to help yourself, and they need to get over that. And I think I'm starting to see that more. Just talking with some of the veterans that I talk to at events, they're actually approaching me now saying, "Hey, I need some help," which is a huge step forward. I really strongly believe that, and I hope it continues.
So you are seeing changes. You think that we have made some progress in this area, Dan?
Oh, I definitely am. I definitely see it from, like I said, from the time that I was in to now. I'm definitely seeing where people are not afraid to ask for help compared to back in, like I said, back in the day that I was in. It wasn't that long ago, but it was still a little while ago where people were not asking for help.
Gotcha. Dan Mitchell, would you agree? And why do you think that things have changed if you do?
I definitely agree. You know, I got out in 1993, and at that time, you know, there's that great saying that the only fish that gets caught is the one that opens its mouth. You know, everybody was supposed to stay quiet, you know, and not talk about the things that were bothering them. You know, that was a very common theme at the time. I think a lot of it's changing because the culture is changing as a whole. I think we're much more open to talking about a lot of different topics and a lot of different things just as a general culture that we weren't so open to talking about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I think that the mental health concerns that veterans face are much more readily accepted in regular conversation where it can just come up and you can talk about it. And there's not as much of a feeling that it should be hidden away or that it should be tucked away.
Thank you. Mike, would you agree?
Yeah. And veterans and service members that are currently utilizing services that have helped them, counseling services, peer support services, to empower them to advocate, you know, for other service members and veterans to do the same, because it is so instrumental and it is so helpful. Additionally, with that, the existence of programs like the Vet Center and then like peer support, which is non-clinical, right? The Vet Center, we are self-contained in terms of record keeping. So no one outside of the Vet Center knows that individual is coming there for services. It doesn't go to the VA. The VA Medical Center doesn't have it. a service member's unit does not have access to that, there's autonomy, which creates or which helps bring down a big barrier to service members who don't reach out for help because they don't want it to impact their profession, which it can and it will. That's real. Like, that's a real concern, which will cause people to not ask for help. They don't want it to say that they're struggling because then they might not be able to promote or they might not be able to get the position that they want. There are resources out there that provide autonomy so that help can be provided, because it's instrumental. And I mean, we should be promoting this because guess what? Like, functionality within your job will be so much better if you're able to talk to somebody about the things about your job that are hard, right? Like, it's work. It's not called work because it's easy. It's called work because it's so challenging. And part of that is what makes being in the service so meaningful, is that it's friggin' hard. You know, it's very challenging. We should be encouraging people to talk about the difficulties so that they can be more operationally functional.
I have a question in the chat box that I don't want to forget because it's really pretty easy one. You talked about resources a minute ago, Mike. Is there a handy guide that providers can access to learn about all the different services and supports available? Is there a document or some sort of catalog or something that's easy for people to grab?
Military OneSource is a pretty robust place to go. This is one of the challenges with the veteran services, is there's just so much. I mean, like, the three of us on this panel don't know everything that's out there, right? I mean, I'm constantly learning about new programs that are available. I guess, I mean, the One Stop obviously is a huge resource for things like that. You just have to ask. You just have to ask the questions. I can't say that there's one like, hey, here's the book on veteran resources, you know, and but attending events like this, networking, and just asking, hey, what's out there, is a huge conduit through which to get information and to find out new things. So please don't stop asking the questions. There's no bad question, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know, so you please ask. And one thing within this community of people, as veterans, a veteran community, like we want to share what we know. So please, if you don't know but you want to know, please come to us and ask us for information, and we will be more than happy to give it to you, because that's one more person, boots on the ground, that can help somebody that we might not have our hands on yet.
Thank you.
Exactly. And there's I don't know if everyone's familiar with, but there's counties have stand downs, which is a huge resource, flea market, I guess you want to call it, but it's a resource fair where there's, all the resources in that county come together and talk about what they do for veterans. Matter of fact, the Jamestown down in Chautauqua, Cattaraugus County is this month. Last month we had Niagara County. The month before that we had the Erie County, and that was happening every year. So look for those, next year, obviously, if you can't make the Jamestown one this time. Also, VSO offices in each county, they have a book. It's a paper copy pamphlet type book that has a lot of resources for veterans. I don't have one here with me, but I have it in my office. And then, like exactly what Mike said, if you're not sure, reach out, call the Veterans One Stop. If you're a veteran, reach out to us at a peer support event, or when you meet Dan Mitchell, or his crew, and they're out talking, ask them, hey, where can I go, or who can I talk to? And we will definitely point you in the right direction.
Thanks for that. One thing that occurred to me is, we talked about peers. We talked about friends and family members. We talked about outside people who don't have any experience of what could be done. I'm thinking about employers. So we talked a lot about work and the importance of work. Is there any advice that any of you would have for employers who have veterans in their workers, in their roster of workers, that would be helpful?
I know there's some companies like Geico and M&T and places like that, the bigger organizations for sure. they have a veteran service office type of thing in their facilities that are there for the veterans of that company to get help or whatever they need, to guide them. And because we deal with a lot of them, they'll call us a lot of times and say, hey, we have a veteran working for us, can you help him out? And we do. So a lot of employers do those type of things. Smaller employers, I'm not sure. I would doubt it. But there's always us, the employers. That's one thing I would tell the employers: if they have veterans working for them, and they're seeing something going on with the veteran, or they think they need some assistance, reach out to us or the vet center to see what we can do for you. And then on the other hand of that, for employers, just to throw it out there, I would say hire veterans.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. We have a question that's come up on the chat about harkening back to the family members issue and the loved ones issue. Is there a special kind of stigma that they deal with when they have a loved one with some mental health issues, or that they themselves might have mental health issues? Dan Mitchell,
Some of them are scared.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, some of them are scared to ask because they don't know the veteran community or the military community as well. Some do, but a lot of them don't, and they're a little nervous about asking because they don't want to harm their veteran. They don't want to put them in a bad situation, and then or they don't want to make them angry, because a lot of the ones that I was dealing with were dealing with PTSD, and their veteran would get angry real easy, and they didn't want them getting mad at them over that. So they would stay back a little bit and not pursue maybe where they should pursue to get them their help.
Yeah, that would be an issue. Wow. I really like stories as a way of getting people engaged and getting people to understand what's going on. And I don't know if any of you have a story, and no names, obviously, but stories of someone that that had the courage to come forward and got services, and we're in a better place as a result of it. Does anything come to mind? You probably have lots, but any particular ones that might come to mind you'd like to share? Any of you?
Well,
I had one gentleman. I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have personal experience with having been in a difficult situation. In 2013, I ran into some tough times, and then I linked up with a veterans organization called Higher Ground, and went on an ice climbing trip. My first experience with peer support. This was my first experience with peer support. Was out on an ice climbing trip in the Adirondacks, and then that changed the trajectory of what I was going to be doing from that point forward. So it's really interesting how getting assistance at a particular time in your life can really just change the dial, can just turn the dial a little bit and change the whole path going forward. And now I'm in this position, and I'm doing the work with the treatment court, and those things probably would not be happening had it not been for that peer support event with that ice climbing trip.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's an example. Yeah.
So that's a great one. Thanks for that. Mike Shurmatz, anything come to mind in terms of a real success story that you can think of?
So many works in progress.
Yeah.
So, but the success, I mean, I can't specifically think of one off the top of my head, but the success stories for me as a clinician are when the veteran shows up and says, I don't need to come in anymore. Like I'm good. And, cause therapy is not meant to be forever. Mm-hmm. And they're expressing themselves. So I have a veteran or service member who, and this is a success, but it's a success shaped in like maybe an outcome that might look like it's not a success, right? But here we go addressing stigma, right? Like we're saying certain things are negative outcomes when in fact that might actually be a super positive outcome for a person if they're in like an unhealthy relationship. So a veteran having the courage to, in a healthy way, confront somebody, and this is, I'm just redacting a lot of this, I'll keep it general. They were in an unhealthy relationship and they were able to recognize they were in that unhealthy relationship. And despite the fact that it was going to be really difficult for them to end that unhealthy relationship, one, because they become dependent upon it, as many people are dependent upon unhealthy relationships, you know, for identity, which is, you know, like if we get into clinical stuff, like that's a whole area that we deal with, right? Like, why do I identify as needing this person when I know that it's bad for me? And then having the ability, the self-worth to say, I'm setting a boundary for myself. I'm ending this relationship because I know it's what's best for me moving forward. I mean, the self-determination that's involved in that, the self-confidence that's involved in that, the ability for somebody to say, this is what I want and what I need, and I'm going to advocate for myself and do that, is huge, and so I know it's framed in like the lens of you know, potentially ending a relationship, but that's so empowering for a veteran to be able to communicate like that with other people and uphold boundaries like that for other people and prioritize their own needs. So I see a lot of that, or I've seen several cases of that in the work that I've done, and it's been really helpful for people to really focus on the healthy relationships and be okay letting go of the unhealthy relationships that have formed.
Thank you for that. Another question has come up in the chat box. Again, we're trying to get to all of them, everybody. But Dan Arnold, you said things about things were changing, about opening up about mental health, and someone is asking about engaging with older veterans, you know, maybe grandparents that simply, finger quotes, don't talk about things. Any advice about, you know, older veterans and what they might need?
To me, that's a tougher one. As in my peer groups that we do have some Vietnam veteran, quite a few veterans that come out to our events. And they're, you know, they were from the time where obviously when mental health, there was the stigma there where you're not going to go, you're not going to do that stuff. They grew up that way. They lived the military that way. And sadly, I still think they think that way. It's that to me, that's where it's going to come from, where their kids and their grandkids may have to speak up for them to get them out of that. Because just the ones that I know is what I can speak of. They're still keep it down. Everything's good. Everything's great. You know, and sometimes you can see their stuff bothering them, or sometimes I talk to their kids, or sometimes even their grandkids, and they tell me that they're worried about them, but they just won't get the help. So it's really, to me, where the caregiver or the family members need to speak for those veterans, because they still maintain that stigma about getting the help.
It sounds like a difficult situation. You know,
it is.
What advice? What could be done to support some of those, you know, children and grandchildren who might be trying to broker this? I don't know. Does anyone have any other?
I mean, the comfort is nobody wants to tell on somebody. You know, nobody ever wants. You know, if somebody comes to someone like us, you know, we report that, and we sort of have to. But I think it's okay to do that. You know, if somebody needs help, we need to make sure that they get the help. They may not ask for it themselves. And I've come across a couple occasions where that was the issue. You know, people are reaching out to me either themselves and saying type of things that make me think that they're going to harm themselves or they're going to need help down the road. And I never once flinched. And I would call somebody or talk to somebody. They may not like me afterwards right away, but they do come around. At least every case that I've been in, they have come around. You know, took a while, and they did come back and thank me and say thank you. So the comfort for those family members to know that, yeah, it may be hard at that time to force them to get help or to take them to get help. Know you're doing the right thing. Know you're doing the right thing for them and your family. They may get mad at you. They may be upset with you, but you know you're doing the right thing. And hopefully, eventually, they will understand what you did was the right thing to do. And it goes back to what Mike said. We're human, and we got to treat people like humans.
Very good. Dan Mitchell, anything to add on that front, though, as far as the actual advice for those support people?
No, sir. Just being completely honest about the situation, just being forthright, letting it all out there. And I really like what Dan said about, don't be afraid to tell on somebody. Don't be afraid to get out there and let somebody know that somebody's suffering or somebody's struggling, because the stakes are pretty high.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say one thing too. As a clinician, I work really hard to normalize the prevalence in people's lives of suicidal ideation, right? Like, people think about dying. We do, right? A lot of times they're fleeting thoughts. We might not even recognize we're having them. We might not consciously know we're having them. Nevertheless, right? Like normalization of the fact that, yeah, sometimes life gets hard, and sometimes we just have that thought that, like, man, this would be a lot easier if I was just dead, right? That's not a crisis point. That's an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody about what they're thinking and feeling, right? Not the, oh my God, I have to call the police and do all this stuff. So basically what I'm saying here is, in conjunction with what the guy said about, like, not telling on somebody, you're not going to cause somebody to want to kill themselves by asking them if they're struggling with something. So just ask, because that might be what they need to hear. That might be the hand that they need to just say, yeah, I am struggling with something right now, and I just need you to listen.
Right, Mike.
Very profound, very true. Courage seems to be such a recurring theme we're seeing here. Especially with a population where courage is such a big, important part of the makeup of what they've been through and what they had to do, but transitioning into this different kind of courage, to go down a different path that maybe is harder and right now. So again, tremendous dialogue. We have only got a couple of minutes left, and I would just like each of you, if you could, well, first, as a reminder to our audience, we need you to take the pledge to end stigma by going to our website, letstalkstigma.org. If your organization would like to join us in our cause, there's information on the website as well. Just click on the members tab to find out how. And just remember, together we can reduce stigma and create an environment of support where help seeking and help giving is the norm. Just got a couple of minutes. I'd like to give each of you about a minute if there's anything we didn't cover, some sort of closing thoughts regarding this topic. Could I start with Dan Mitchell? Things we didn't think today is closing arguments.
I really liked what Michael just said about it's so important to have these conversations, to be willing to be open to the conversations, and that everybody goes through difficult times, and we can all relate to that. We all have that common denominator of knowing what a difficult time is, and we can talk about it. We can communicate with each other about it.
Thank you, Dan. And Dan Arnold, your last thoughts.
Yeah, I just like to say peer support. Come out, talk to people. Don't keep it in. Don't think about the stigma of going to places. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to talk to people. Like Mike was saying earlier, come out to our events if you want to come to talk. Call me. I'll do one-on-ones and we'll talk. Or have a friend, a battle buddy, somebody you can talk to. And talking is important.
Absolutely true. And Mike Shurmatz, your thoughts.
I guess I'll circle back to just, we're all human beings, and we should look to each other and at each other as human beings. It's funny. I guess I'll end with a metaphor, because I'm a clinician and we speak in metaphors, right? So, when you go outside and you look at a tree, do you judge it because of the way it grew? Do you look at it and say, oh, that tree's stupid? Or why did that branch grow that way? That's dumb, or that's not right. No, you just look at the tree and appreciate it for the fact that it's a tree. And it grew however it grew, and it's doing its thing, and it's serving its purpose, and it's living its tree life. But then we look at people and we jump to judgment so quickly. Oh, what happened to them? What's wrong with them? Why are they wearing that? Why did they do this? Why this? You know? So maybe we can look at each other a little bit more like trees and judge a little bit less, and maybe seek understanding a little bit more. And I think if we can adopt that perspective, we can be more compassionate and empathic towards each other, which I think would go a long way to help address stigma and just overall struggles in lives.
Well said. Thank you very much for that. Once again, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Dan Arnold, Dan Mitchell, and Mike Shurmatz. I'd also like to thank everyone behind the scenes, Mike Telesco from Telesco Creative Group for his vision and technical support, Carol Doggett from the Mental Health Advocates of Western New York, and Karen Karaszewski from KKPR Buffalo for their support as well. We'll be on a holiday break in December, but look for our next Facebook Live in January when our topic will be State of Stigma, Wellness Strategies for a Mentally Healthy New Year. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for being a part of today. And on behalf of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, until next time, I'm Matt Smith. Stand up to stigma and good luck on your wellness journey.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for attending.
Thanks.